Okay, looks like the trickle of people has stopped for a minute, so I will do a quick introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Caroline Steingart. I'm the Director of Finance at Nucleate. For those who don't know, Nucleate is a 501c3 nonprofit with a mission of empowering the next generation of biotech leaders. And in doing that, we partner with a lot of organizations, one of them being Fedsprout. Fedsprout is our grant writing partner this year, and they have been absolutely instrumental in helping us and helping you learn more about the grant writing process. And with that, I will hand it over to Fedsprout for their introduction.
Thank you, Caroline. My name is Alap Shah. I'm the president and CEO at Fedsprout. And we'll go to the next slide. We're a consulting firm helping companies across the United States with various services to accelerate their funding needs when it comes to government funding. Our mission is to drive innovation in a way where it's meaningfully causing positive impacts to society and our economy. And we do proposal writing, grant management, or award management, and then we also help with commercialization planning and strategies. For today's webinar, I'm going to hand it off to Arithro, but before I do that, I want to mention that we do have questions and answers to be put into the chat, so please feel free to add any questions you have there. We will, Sean, who is also on the call and is one of our expert proposal writers, he and I will be trying to address your questions in the chat itself. And any questions we're not able to address during the chat, during the webinar, we'll be pushing towards the end where we'll have about 10 minutes, hopefully, for Q&A. And we'll pass those questions on to Arithro, who's going to be the speaker today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Arithro.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So just few logistics things. I'm using different screens, so I might be looking this way, that way. So just letting you know. And one screen I can see all of you, and the other the presentation is going on. So just letting you know that. A little bit of background. I'm not sure if you were there in my first presentation, but I was a faculty research lab running a lab in biomedical research in University of Rochester, upstate New York, and then Michigan State University. Moved to industry as the therapeutic area head for global drug discovery for Ferring Pharmaceuticals. Then moved to NIH as a program officer for NICHD. I was leading their SBIR portfolio in women's health, and I also co-founded, and currently I'm a co-founder and the CSO of a biotech startup, Maple Therapeutics, which is developing a small molecule for endometriosis. So I'm going to start with different phases of the SBIR, STTR grants, and this is something that I covered last time, but in detail. So I'm not going to go into details, but the SBIR grants are different phases or different types of SBIR grants. And just to recapitulate what I did last time, your phase one is basically a grant. The mechanism is focused on understanding the feasibility of your idea, of your product, and to establish proof of concept in your technical or your scientific concept. And then also to understand whether whatever you're developing, your product, is it marketable? Does it have a commercial potential and all? So in simple terms, what phase one grants, the focus of the phase one grant is for the NIH to understand whether this is worth investing. Is it realistic of what you're developing, and can it be marketable? So that is what the whole aim of phase one is. Now, once you have developed your proof of concept or your feasibility, then you move to the product development phase, and that can be covered by phase two or direct to phase two. So for going into phase two, you have to have your feasibility and proof of concept established. Now, what phase two grants deal with is basically validation studies, prototype development, efficacy, safety. Now, I come from a drug discovery background, so I'm going to give you a lot of examples related to that, but you can extrapolate that to your product. But that is what the phase two grants are dealing with. And when you're writing a phase two grant, you have to have a very well-defined team and also your commercialization plan has to be very, very crystallized. So basically, in simple terms, what phase 2 is taking your idea forward towards development of the product that can be sold. So that is what the focus is. There is another type of grant, which is basically a mixture or a combination of phase 1 and phase 2, which is called fast track. Now, when you can go to fast track, the fast track is sometimes you have your proof of concept feasibility more or less done, about 60, 70, 80% done, but you just need one small study that is left, that is to establish it finally. That can be easily done in 6 months or 7 months time. But now you don't want to wait and write a phase 1, go through the review process, get the grant, then again go and write a phase 2 and all. That's waste of time, and you don't want to do it. So what you can do is you can go for the fast track. So which is basically you write your phase 1, but your phase 2 studies are also crystallized. You have a fair idea of what the next step will be. You have a very well-developed team and the commercialization plan. So what you do is you take your phase 1, you take your phase 2, combine it together, and you still, the difference is still there. You have to show what you want to do in phase 1 and then also define what you're going to do in phase 2 and submit a single grant as a fast track. So you are getting both phase 1 and phase 2 reviewed in one go. Okay. So that's all I'm going to talk about today on these different types of phases, because I've already touched these in details in my last seminar. What I'm going to focus now is basically the writing of the grants, a little bit more on behind the scenes, what goes on and what needs to be done in order to write a grant. So before you start writing anything, remember one thing: your grant, you have to write it in such a way that a high school kid should able to read it and appreciate your grant. That is your rule of thumb for writing a grant. And believe me, this works. Okay. The major thing of the grant is don't oversell. Okay. Don't tell that you're going to cure prostate cancer or you're going to cure cancer or something like that. Stick to your logic, stick to your data, and your claim should be based on the rationale. Don't oversell. The other thing is take ego out of writing completely. You are not writing it for yourself. You're writing for the reviewer. You know your product, your program so well that you don't have to show off that you know it. We know you know it. Okay. What you need to do is this very intricate, the niche product thing that you are discussing every day. You take it, dumb it down, literally dumb it down to such a level that any person who has a basic knowledge of science can read it, appreciate it, and understand the impact of it. That is the key. Appreciation of what you're not only understanding, but appreciation of what you're doing, why you're doing it. That is the key. Don't use any jargons. Don't use anything that is very niche. Use real world evidence or relevance and try to sell your story. That is the number one suggestion I can give you for writing grants. I've written grants throughout my life. I've been a reviewer. I've been a PO. I've done everything. So I'm telling you this. Okay. Write this as a formula of gap, solution, impact. So whatever you're writing, your whole structure, it should be: what is the problem? What is the unmet need? What is your solution? And then what is the impact? The big picture. And you should have measurable milestones for each of your aims. Okay. And these measurable milestones are not like we will develop a prototype or the safety study of this compound will be established. No, your milestone should be very, very specific. It should be quantitative or measurable. That gives you a specific criteria for the success of the grant. And it's always like a percentage or a threshold. Like I'm just giving an idea, like 60% of cell death can be stopped by this drug or something like that. So see, I'm giving a specific thing of cell death. I'm talking about a percentage. I'm giving a threshold. Okay. So that kind of measurable milestones are needed for your each aim so that it can be used to measure the success criteria. Okay. The other key point, your goal is to make the reviewer's life easy. And this, I'm going to give more details on the reviewer side, what the reviewer goes through, what the reviewer, the processes and all. And that is why I'm saying your goal is to make the reviewer's life easy. Okay. What the grant reviewing process is, the reviewer needs to review the grants based on certain criteria. Okay. So now, and innovation is one of the major things. Significance is one of the major things. Don't bury it. Don't hide it in the grant thing. Make it upfront and write it in such a way using these terms. This is innovative. This is unique. This is the novel of our approach, so that as they're reading through, these words catches their eyes and they know exactly what you're talking about. Oh, I'm reading, oh, I'm looking for significance. This is the significance. Oh, I'm looking for innovation. Oh, this is the innovation because I said it's novel, unique and all. So use these phrases. You're telling a story. So don't write like paragraph wise without any subheadings and all. It's very difficult to follow. It's very difficult to read. Break down your stories in different subsections. Keep gaps. That is the major thing. Less is more in a grant. You need to say everything, but in a succinct, easy to read, easy to understand way, breaking it down into subsections or sections. Okay. Short sentences. You're not writing a novel here. You're not writing, you're not using big words. This is not a English literature novel or something like that. So use simple sentences, simple words, short sentences, easy to read, quick to understand. Okay. Now, when you're writing it, use the way you're writing it is you should mirror the review criteria. Okay. You are reviewed, your grant is reviewed based on significance, innovation, approach, investigators. So break it down based on that. Okay. So that when the reviewer is reading it, they know exactly where your significance is. They're not going to search for it and all. And then, okay, I can give a score based on the significance. That's where it is. This is where the approach is. This is where the innovation is. Okay. Use the scoring template as your template for writing the grant. Okay. And use subheads. Key thing, what I said, a high school kid should understand and appreciate your grant, and you want to make the reviewer's life easy. That is what the main thing is of writing a grant. Finally, what you want to do is you need to add as much diagrams, tables, flow charts, summary in the grant, because what happens is reviewers always don't read the grant initially. Okay. What they do is they skim the grant, they look at the specific aims page, they look at the abstract, and then they skim the grant. And within 5 minutes, they form the impression. The first impression matters. And when they're skimming the grant, they're not reading it. But if you have really nice pictures of flowcharts and all, which summarizes each section, they can look at the grants, they can look at the graphs and tables and all, and they can already know and have an idea of what the grant is about, what the significance is, what the preliminary data is about. Okay. The another important thing about this is that during the review process, when you're having the study section and all, and I'm going to go in details about that, while the reviewers are talking about your grant, the other panel members are sitting and skimming through the grants. They're not reading it. So if you have figures, tables, and everything, it's easier for them to understand and appreciate your grant much easier. Okay. And I'm going to go more in details about this. But what I'm saying is each section should have this. Okay. And then proofread it so that you know that there is a logic, there are no typos. Again, if you have typos, if there's logic is all over the place and all, the reviewer gets irritated. You don't want the reviewer to get irritated. Okay. If the reviewer has to read your one sentence 2 times, or if they read the paragraph 2 times in order to understand it, you have lost the game. They should read it once, look at the figure, or just look at the figure, they have an impression, then they go read what you're saying, they get it. That's the best thing. If the reviewer can read your grant in half an hour to 45 minutes, understand it, comprehend it, appreciate what you're doing, you're golden. That is what it should, the way you should write it. Okay. So those are the tips. Now there are a few things that I want to make you aware of based on the current situation. There's a lot of things going on based on the current situation. And this is one. This thing came out last week, I think last week. Now, a lot of people are using AI, ChatGPT to write their grants and all. What NIH is doing right now is the moment you submit your grant, they are putting it through an AI detector or something. And if a significant portion of your grants are written by AI, they are rejecting it. Okay, it's like, when you submit a college assignment and all, you have turned it in and stuff like that. That's what they're doing. Now, my suggestion is there's a lot of unknowns here. They're saying it might be research strategy, it might be the commercial application, if the commercial plan, if it's a phase 2 and all. But my suggestion is don't even write your bio sketches, because if there are spaces in bio sketches which are written, and I wrote my bio sketch with my AI thing. I'm telling you right now. But the thing is, don't even write your bio sketch with AI, because what they're going to do is they're not going to take research strategy or commercial. They take the whole grant and put it through an AI detector, and a number will come up. Now, that number might be coming up from BioSketch or something else, and not from research strategy. And they say, oh, this is all AI written. So what I suggest is don't use ChatGPT. Don't use that for writing these grants. Now, my suggestion is get a subscription for an AI detector, because sometimes what's happening is the AI is so similar to humans that even if you write the grant, AI is detecting it as an AI, as if it's written by an AI. And it's saying, though, this is 50% or 60% of it is written by AI. So all you need to do is you need to change few words and all, and then it becomes written by a human. But my suggestion is whatever you're writing section-wise, put it through AI detector to make sure that it's not picking up as an AI. Because that's what NIH is doing right now. The moment you submit it, they will do that. Okay, because now they are restricting the number of grants that are going even into the review process. So they are also restricting how many grants you can submit per year as a PI, whether it's renewal, whether it's resubmission or revision or all. It's only 6. Okay, so this is the new thing, and you have to be very, very careful about this now, especially for this from this deadline, like the September deadline onwards, because this is something new that came. Your grant proposal has all of this. Now, my reason of showing you this slide is that it's not only to make you realize that this is not only about the specific aims, the writing, the research strategy and all. There are other components also that needs a lot of writing, that needs a lot of time to gather. So start early, as soon as possible. If you start now, you have only less than a month or just a month. It's already late. You should have started 3 weeks back. But what I'm trying to show you is that it's not only writing the grant. There are other components of administrative components and other writing things that goes together with the grant. Okay, I'm not going to talk all of these. I'm going to more of focus on how to write the grant, the tips and all of that. But this is something that you should be aware of. Okay, these are the forms that needs to be filled up. Okay, there are a lot of forms. Once you do this, you have to upload it. You have to do the form. So there are a lot of other administrative, other things that needs to be done before you can submit the grant. Just by writing finishing the strategy, a research strategy, or the commercial plan, or the summary, the specific aims is not enough. There are other things. Okay. So let's talk about this project narrative and summary, project summary. What is it? Your project narrative is basically a 3-line thing that goes to the public. What is because SBIR is public money. It's NIH's public money. So the public needs to understand what the government is funding the grants and where they're spending their money, right? So your project narrative are 3 sentences, and that is what you're saying is, what is the problem? What are you trying to develop? And the big picture, nothing else. That's all you need to know. Your project summary is the abstract of your proposal, and which is basically 30 lines. Now, if you get the grant, if your grant or proposal is getting funded, the project narrative and the project summary is open to the public. There is a website called Reporter. If you do a search and all, you can get the project summary and the narrative of all the grants that NIH is funding. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind is not to put any proprietary information on the project summary or in the project narrative, because that becomes prior art for IP reasons and all, and you don't want to because that's a proprietary knowledge. You do not want that to go into public. Okay, so write your abstract or your project narrative keeping that in mind, because that is something, if your grant gets funded, that is something is out in the open. Okay, now comes the specific aim speech. This is a one-page thing. You win or lose your grant on this page. This is where once the reviewer starts reading it, the reviewer has started already forming. So I'm a review. I have been and I am a reviewer. What I do is I go and read the project narrative first. Okay, what is this about? I read the project summary and immediately I go to specific aim speech. So by project summary, I've already started forming an opinion about the grant. When I read the specific aims page, by the end of the specific aims page, I already know whether the grant is, is this good or not, whether I'm excited or not. So this is the page where you win or lose the reviewer. Now, think of your specific aims page as your 20-minute pitch to the VC when you're giving a pitch for the first time. When you approach a VC and all, they said, we are interested. Why don't you send us your non-confidential slide deck and all. This is your non-confidential slide deck. Okay, and then they say, okay, we want to meet with you for half an hour. So your 20-minute pitch, and then you have 10 minutes of the questions and all. This is your 20-minute pitch. Okay, and what it needs to include is you need to include an introduction. You need to include the significance, which should be, introduction is about your company, 1 or 2 lines. What is your company? What are you trying to develop and all? So that's the first line. The reviewer should know exactly what you're talking about, right? And then your significance. What is the problem? What is the unmet need? What is the impact? Preliminary data. What is your product will look like? What are you trying to develop? What is the innovation about it? The commercial application, the aims and phase, the plans for the next step. If you're writing a phase 1, what are your plans for phase 2? If you're writing a phase 2, what are your plans for phase 2B or next thing, right? Now, this is a lot of things, okay? The way to do it is include everything, but write it succinctly. Now, there are thousands of ways to skin a cat. So there are thousands of ways to write a grant. The key is grantsmanship. That's the secret sauce. How to write everything, including all of this in one single page. And there is no room, and you see how tight it is. There's no room for redundancy. TMI, always remember when you are writing a specific aims page, always ask yourself, is this too much information? What is the key information? Okay. The other thing is every program, every project has some issues, some questions. You are the best person to know what are the gaps or the major burning issues or problems or challenges in your program, right? If you know it's this is a 15 to 20 people panel, right? The panel will also pick this up. My suggestion is address it upfront in the specific aims page in 2 lines or something. The key is to make the reviewer aware that you are aware of the problem and all, and don't say problem, say it's a challenge and all, and write 1 line what you're thinking as a mitigation plan and all, and then explain it in the research strategy portion. And I'm going to talk about it later on. But the idea here is making the reviewer aware that you are also aware of this problem and you know this problem and you have this under control. Because what happens is when they're reading the specific aims page, if this question comes up and you address it some 4 or 5 pages back in the research strategy, the question keeps nagging in the brain and it has an effect when I'm forming an opinion about your grant and all. Even though you address it 4 or 5 pages back, this is a nagging question that keeps in my brain as I'm reading it, and it changes my opinion. And it's very difficult to go back once you address it in the 4th page or 5th page of your research strategy or 2nd page of your research, to go back and change this opinion. The opinion is already formed. You see, so if there is something, address it upfront. Okay. The other thing is you have to realize that your aim of SBIR is product development. Do not move away from it. Do not make it to gain knowledge or something like that, an academic thing. It's product development. And it's all about the writing style, grantsmanship. I've seen a lot of grants where the product is great and all, but they completely lost it because of their grantsmanship. They don't know how to tell a story. They don't know that the writing styles were bad and all. Okay, so it's all about how well you write. Of course, you need to have the raw materials, your project and thing, but I've seen not that much stellar program or project, but they're getting funded and all because of the writing style, how well you tell the story. Okay, so by specific aims page, the reviewer has already formed his or her opinion. Okay, now it's more about the details. Now some easy fixes, okay, because of from common problems. One problem is aim. How many aim you should have? Now, I don't know if you realize what Goldilocks principle is. Like, Goldilocks goes to the in the forest, and it went into the heart of the bear, and there are three soup. One is too hot, one is too cold, one is just right. The number of aims you should have is the Goldilocks principle. If you have less aims and all, it's a missed opportunity. They will say it lacks depth, it's superficial and all. If you have too much, too many, they will say this program is overambitious, it's not going to get completed within a timeline and all. So you should have just the right number of aims. And my theory here is for phase one, you should have only one aim. If you want, you can have two aims, but the second aim should be a little bit short and all, and a continuation of the aim one. Okay. So I'm giving an example from drug discovery thing. If you want to establish proof of concept for efficacy, right, of your drug, you can have one aim, two parts. One is a PK of your drug and all, and then your efficacy in your efficacy model. Two models efficacy, that's all you need to establish your proof of concept and feasibility. Okay, if you're doing phase two, you can have two aims or three is stretching, but it all depends on what type of aim and what you're doing it. If I am doing it as a drug discovery thing, I will have efficacy, PK and all as a phase one. And then in phase two, I will do non-GLP tox studies and GLP tox studies. That's all as aim one and aim two. Okay, so things like that, but you have to be very careful. And again, I'm just giving you an example. You have to understand your program and think whether it can be done within 2 years or 1 year or not. The other thing is team. Okay, you should cover every aspect of your program with a team member. For example, again, drug discovery example. If you are developing a small molecule drug, you should have a medicinal chemist, you should have a therapeutic person, you should have a DMPK person, you should have a tox person, something like that. If you're developing something engineering, you should have an engineer, you should have area specific person. If you are proposing clinical trial, you should have an MD who is involved in the clinical trial design and all. So these are very easy fixes. Okay, your SAB team should be also well-rounded. If you're doing something in cancer and you have a SAB team member in orthopedic surgery, that should not be the thing. Your SAB team should complement of what you're developing. Okay, diversity. Now I know this is a taboo word now in this current situation and all, but still you cannot have everyone female or everyone male. You should have a decent ratio of male and female in the SAB member and all. And also a really good balance of academia, industry, business. Now, you might say, oh, we have a 2-member team. We are exclusively, industry thing. That's great. You can have industry and business, but then fill up the academia by having someone from academia in the SAB as an SAB member. Or you are collaborating, you are subcontracting a grant with an academic partner, right? So make sure you highlight that. So it's a balance, but these are very easy fixes to very common problems. Now let's talk about research strategy. The research strategy, you have 6 pages for phase 1 and 12 pages for phase 2. What I do usually is I use my specific aims page as a template, use all of these subsections and just expand it. That's the strategy I use for research strategy. Okay, but what is key is make sure you have stats to demonstrate significance. Don't say lung cancer is the most common cause of cancer deaths and all. Use numbers, percentage. This amount of lung cancer patients, of number of people in the US are affected by lung cancer. This amount die of this. See, it's a statistics. When you're talking about commercial things, market size, give them a graph. Okay. Very, very important to give graphs, tables, and figures. If you're talking about, again, I'm just saying, current standard of care, right? You're talking about the medicines that are used in, say, a specific cancer and thing. Put it, rather than writing it, put it in a table. It's much more easier. It's easier if you have a table, graph, and all to comprehend, to understand. They will remember it much more than if you write it as a paragraph. Because reading the paragraph, writing it, and all, they might lose it, they might not understand it, they might not remember it. But if you have a table, if you have a figure, it's much easier to read, much easier to understand, and it stays in your brain. Because they're writing it, they're reading it, but then after a month or so, they're going to go and do the discussion in the study section, right? So that those figures and all stays in your brain, okay? The other thing is, make sure you refer to published studies. You have an idea. What is the idea based on? What are the rationale? You should always rationalize your idea and what is it based on. Make sure you refer to published papers. I had a grant where they wrote everything, but there was nothing, no reference, zero reference. They got hammered for that. Okay, experimental design. The experimental design is the one that is easy to fix, but the one that will be most criticized. Here, again, it's a Goldilocks principle. You don't want to provide a lot of information, but you need to provide enough information. For example, if you're doing toxicity studies, I'm just saying, again, drug discovery example, you need to provide the species, you need to provide the dose, what is the basis of the dose, if you have done PK or not, how many, the N of it, how many animals, which sex of it. But you don't need to give them the details of, say, phosphate buffer or a specific buffer. See, there's a balance. What you need, what is essential, and what is too much. That is very important thing in experimental design, because otherwise it might go offhand and it might be 6 pages. You're all doing is experimental design. So that is the key thing of experimental design. Milestones, it's not outcomes. Okay, each aim should have a milestone. Don't say it as an outcome, because outcome is very academic. And I've already told you about the milestone. It should be measurable, it should be quantifiable, and that should relate to what you're proposing. And each aim should have also potential risk and mitigation plan, not alternative approach. That's an academic thing. And finally, you should provide a timeline, a Gantt chart of when these experiments are going to do and all, and it should match with the timeline of the grant. Like, if it's a phase 1, it might be 1 year, 2 year. If it's phase 2, it might be 2 years, 3 years. And then the next stage. Reviewers like to see what's next. Have you thought about it? Is there a path forward? If you're doing phase 1, what are your plans for phase 2? You don't need a lot, but at least tell them, this is efficacy. If you're doing phase 1, I'm doing efficacy. At the end of these studies, efficacy studies, POC will be established. Then in phase 2, we will do toxicology studies as non-GLP and GLP, something like that. If you're doing phase 2, then say, what next? We have established toxicology and all. In phase 2B, we're going to do this. Something next. That is very important. There is another component, and now I'm going to talk about a few other components of the grants. I'm not going to go into details of it, but I'm going to make you aware of it. There is something called data management and sharing plan. This is something that every grant has now. It has started in the last 2 years. It has few components. As an SBIR grant, you have to complete these components, but you can get away by saying that because it's a small business grant and the data might be proprietary, you are not going to share this data until 20 years after the award date. So that is where you do it. Okay, I'm not going to go into details because there are other things that's much more important that I'm going to talk about, but this is what I'm going to make you aware of. The budget, there are different areas of the budget that you need to talk about. You need to also do a budget justification. That's a separate document, but you need to justify each part of the budget. Why are you talking, asking for this amount of money for the personnel, where the travel is, and also these are all the things that you have to be aware of, and you need to do it. Foreign disclosure. That is what I want to talk about. This is, again, a very, very important thing in this current situation. What used to happen before this current situation is that you need to disclose your foreign ties and all. And after the grant got reviewed and all, and before they could give you the grant, the NIH used to do a foreign disclosure assessment. And we don't know. The POs also did not know how it is. It's a very, very closely guarded way of how the government or the NIH used to do it. It's beyond NIH, actually. And then they would come and say, there's a foreign risk, there's not a foreign risk. Okay. Technically, earlier on, what it used to be is that if there are some countries that were on the banned list of NIH, then they would say, oh, you have this connection, that's why there's a foreign risk, we are not going to give you the grant. And that's where it stayed. Now it's completely different. And I'm going to talk about this. But before I do it, if you have anything, your grant has anything to do with these 5 countries, Cuba, China, including Hong Kong and Macau, Russia, Venezuela, Iran, and North Korea, your grant is not going to get funded, period. Okay, any ties. Okay, that's one thing. Now, in the current situation, what they're doing is they are going much beyond. And if you have any foreign ties with anything, they are not funding. Okay, so one thing is that most of the all the studies have to be done in the United States. That's a requirement of the SBIR grant. But what they're going beyond is, and I have grants that have faced this, if an SME member is a foreign person and they're seeing that, so they're going to say it's a foreign connection and I'm not going to do it. They're using AI. Basically, they're using AI for the whole grant and picking up foreign names. If I had a grant where a part of the preliminary data was done in Australia, and in the grant they have said so-and-so, Dr. so-and-so in this institute in Australia did the grant, the data was generated and all, and then they describe the preliminary data. It got flagged, and you cannot even submit it. Like once you submit it, it doesn't go into review also. They're saying this is a foreign disclosure. So they're doing it much early on and getting rid of grants as early as possible. So you don't need to do that. You can say the preliminary data was generated here. You don't need to tell them where the data was generated. It's not required. There was another grant where they have put a biosketch of a person who is a big name, but that person was not directly involved in the grant, but they thought that putting the biosketch helps them, but that person was in Spain. It got flagged. So anything with a foreign person, you don't want to do it. They're going one step ahead. If early on what it was if the CRO is a foreign CRO like Ushi, Farmeron, or someone in UK and all, but they have the work is being done because all of these have their subsidiaries in the US and the work is being done in the US, it was perfectly fine. Now there's some of cases they're coming and saying, no, the CRO is actually a foreign CRO. Their headquarters, it's a foreign company. Even though the work is being done in the US, you cannot use this CRO. You have to go and use a US CRO, which is a US company, which is a US-based, headquarter-based CRO. So you have to be aware of all of this. Similarly, for clinical trials, if you're proposing clinical trial, make sure you know which one is a clinical trial, which one is a clinical study. I had a grant where they submitted as a clinical study. And again, who makes the decision? No one knows. The person who is doing it, they don't even know what they're talking about, to be honest, but it came back. They did not allow it to go into the review process even. They said, this is not a clinical study, this is a clinical trial. Come back in the next cycle. So there are different options here. Like there are different tools in NIH, and I have mentioned these all here, where you can go and give the details of your study, and that will tell you this is whether this is a clinical trial, this is a clinical study. If you're still in doubt, talk to your PO, talk to the clinical trial. There are clinical trial offices attached to NIH or to the IC. Talk to them and ask them, this is my project. Do you think it's a clinical trial? Do you think it's a clinical study? Now, what I would suggest is get the answer in an email format, okay? Because in case they flag you when you submit this grant, you can always say, I have used these tools that are provided by the NIH and take screenshots. Once you have done it, take screenshots. and tell them that those tools told me that this is a clinical study, not a clinical trial. I also contacted the clinical trial office and the PO, and they said, see, this is the email that I have. And they said it's a clinical trial. So how can you say that this is not a clinical study? Okay, but make sure you do these things and take screenshots and all and keep it for your, as a document if this thing happens. There are two people you need to understand and their role in this whole process. One is the SRO, which is the review officer, scientific review, and then the program officer, who is the PO. Okay, the SRO is the person who handles the grant when you submit it till the end of the whole review process, till you get your summary statement. He or she is the person who actually, forms the review panel, invites the people in the review panel, decides who are the people in the reviewers who will get your grant, runs the review panel, writes the summary statement of application, and also that is the person. So if you have questions related to which study section this grant goes to, or you need to submit some extra data and all after the submission process, this is the person to talk to. The program officer is more of an advocate. So the program officer has a portfolio of grants and all on different indications. And he or she is the one who advocate the grants, the area under him or her. And that is the person you talk to before you submit the grant about how to write the grant, what you needed, how is the NIH really interested in the grant. The program officer also writes these areas where the grants are getting submitted and all. For example, think of the program officer as the therapeutic area head of a company, while the SRO is someone who is running the due diligence meeting or the board of whatever external innovation. So think of that way. Your program officer is someone you're going to talk to after you get your summary statement, how to improve it. The program officer also has some hand in whether your grant is getting funded or not. Okay, so that is the thing. So program officer has some hand on that. So let's talk about the review process. And I want to give a little bit more background of what goes behind it, because that tells you how to write the grant. Okay. For the review process, before the study section and everything, and even during the study section, your SRO is the boss. The PO has no role. They keep it specifically separate. Okay. But if the SRO decides who the panel members would be and all, the SRO can ask the PO to suggest names, because the SRO can be from any other field. The PO is very, very involved in the field, knows the people in the field, all the indication and all. So the SRO might say, okay, I have a cancer, say lung cancer or women's health study section. They might ask the PO, can you suggest a list of names whom I can invite as a panel member for this review thing? The PO will give them the name, but the SRO decides who to contact or not. PO has no hand in that. Okay. Now, once the SRO invites it and the panel member is done, then the SRO assigns each grant to a reviewer. Now, there are 3 reviewers assigned to a proposal: primary reviewer, reviewer 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Now, the reviewers get their grant 1 month prior to the study section. Okay. And each reviewer is assigned about 5 to 8 grants, depending on the total number of grants, but usually it's 5 to 8 grants. Now, if I'm a reviewer, and I'm going to say it here, because I'm going to just tell you my experience of how it happens. Now, if I'm the reviewer, I usually get 8 grants. 3 of it is primary reviewer, 2 of the grants or 3 of the grants I'm a secondary reviewer, and 2 or 3 grants I'm the third reviewer and all. Not like a person is being primary reviewer for all the grants. It's a mixture. Now, what happens is when I get the grant, there is a platform, an online platform where it's assigned and all. I read the grant. I have 1 month to read the grant and write the statement of these grants. Okay. And then I give an initial score and I upload those scores and those statements on the platform. Okay. Now, when I'm writing these grants within this 1 month, I don't know who the other reviewers are of these grants. I don't see the reviews of these other reviewers. I don't see the score of these other reviewers. Only when I submit it on the platform and when others have submitted on the platform, I cannot make any changes once I submit it. Then only I can see the reviews of the other 2 reviewers and the scores of it. Okay. Now, so you have to realize if all 3 reviewers are going after or have a criticism of a specific thing, that means there's a problem with your grant or the way you are writing it, that you are not communicating it properly, because these reviewers are reviewing it completely independent of each other. There is one reviewer in California, the other in Texas, the other in Boston, and they're reviewing it without being biased and all. And if all 3 of them are asking the same question or saying that this is a problem, then genuinely this is a problem. If it's not a problem, then you have done the good job of communicating it or addressing it. Okay. Now, once the initial scores have been submitted and all, then the SRO ranks them on these initial scores, and 50% of the grants are triaged. The bottom 50% are triaged. They are not discussed. So you don't get a summary statement. Okay. Now let's talk about the reviewer's side. Who is the reviewer? The reviewer is basically an academic person or someone from biotech or industry and all, someone like me. Okay. Right. And they're very busy. They're very busy. And they have agreed to be on the study section because either they know their PO, the POs have contacted, their name came from the PO or the SRO and they wanted to do that, or they wanted to do it because it looks good on their CV and all. But to them, reviewing this grant, see, it has 1 month, you have 8 grants, and it's one more thing to do in this busy life, right? So when do they review their grants? They either review your grant before going to bed, or if someone is an early person, they do it early morning. If they're traveling while they're waiting in the airport, or during the flight, or at a cafe or something, or they're in a conference that's going on and they're looking at your grant. So see, this is the thing. So why I'm telling you, you have to make the reviewer's life easy. Or they figure out a time in their busy schedule, because it's like, oh my God, 2 weeks have gone, I still have 5 grants to review. It's like that. So make the reviewer's life easy. They should read it, easily get it and all. If the reviewer has to go through this, like, oh my God, I don't understand what this is going on, or they have to they read it and like, what are they talking about? And they have to read it again, or 1 paragraph or 2 sentences again. You lost it. So see why I'm telling you, your main aim is to dumb it down, make the reviewer's life easy. That is the key of a grant to be successful. So what happens? And I have a few more slides. I have 5 minutes or 10 minutes. That's fine. But what happens? We submit the initial scores. 50% gets triaged 2 days before we can see which grants getting reviewed on the NIH platform and all. So you go to the study section. It can be face-to-face. It can be online and all. There are this, and if it's face-to-face, this is how it looks like. You have a bunch of these reviewers. SRO is there. The POs are also there. Now, in early days, POs used to come into the meeting. Now most POs just log in and they're listening. They're remote, but they're listening what's going on. Okay, so they have a grant. The grants are discussed based on the initial ranking. So the first grant comes in, the primary reviewer. So what the SRO asks is, okay, reviewer 1, 2, 3, what are your initial scores? Okay, and so that the whole panel knows it. The whole panel doesn't know what the scores are. So I'm an initial reviewer. I said my score is 3. Second reviewer says my score is 4, and the third reviewer, it's always the third reviewer, says my score is 5. Okay, so okay, there's a what? Sometimes it's very narrow, sometimes it's wide. And then the primary reviewer starts talking about the grant. Succinctly, they talk about the primary reviewer is the one who is presenting the grant. What is the grant about? What are they planning to do? What is the big picture and all? And then he or she talks about the pros and the cons, the weaknesses and the strengths of the grant and all of that. Then once the primary reviewer is on, the primary reviewer is the one who talks about the grant the most. After that, the second review and the third reviewer adds on. if there is something else they're talking. Now, as these reviewers are talking, the rest of the panel member, they haven't read your grant. They don't have time and all. They are looking, so they can see your grant now on the screen. They are reading through the grant. They are skimming through it, right? Within this 10, 15 minutes time. So that is why I'm telling you, you need to have figures and tables and all, because as they're skimming, they're also forming the opinion. They're listening and they're also skimming through the grants. So if you have your figures and all, it's much easier for them to form the idea and all. Okay. Now, once this is done, then the panel opens up for discussion. So now the other panel members start asking questions to these three reviewers. This is the problem, or you said this, but they have done this. Why is this? Why is that? I have seen panel discussions going on for 30 minutes. I have seen panel discussion for a grant going for 5 minutes. The less is discussed, the better it is. The more you talk about the grant, the worse the scores will be, believe me. I have seen grants getting an initial score with a range of 2 and 3, and the panel discussion going on, and the score getting tanked, and then it gets a lower score. Okay. Now, if it's panel discussion, so the panel doesn't have to agree. If the discussion is going on, then the SRO says, okay, enough discussion. I think we get the picture. We don't have to agree and all. And as these discussions are going on, the study section chair is writing down all that is getting discussed. And that is your first paragraph of your summary statement, the summary of discussion. So that is very important when you're reading it, because that highlights what has been discussed. Okay. And try to read between the lines when you get the summary statement for that. Okay. Now, once this is done, then the SRO asks for the final score for reviewer 1, 2, 3. And reviewer 1 says, okay, based on the discussion and all, my initial score was 2. Now I want to go down up to 3. Or someone says, my initial score was 5. I want to go down to 4 and all. So now based on that, there's a range. Based on reviewer 1, 2, 3, there's a range of scores. And the panel members are asked to vote. Now they can vote within this range, or they can vote outside the range. The reviewer, the SRO actually says, okay, based on these discussion, the range is 1 or 2 to 3, something like that. And the panel member can say, okay, they have to actually identify themselves and say, I am voting outside the range. And the SRO asks why. So this is how all this thing happens. Okay. Now, some common application problems, and I'm hurrying now because we are on time, but I'll just need 2 more. I just have 2 or 3 more slides, and I'm done. Your significance and what are the common application problems? There's no significance, lack of innovation. If they're going after your significance, they're going after innovation. It is very difficult to fix it. So make sure you have a solid significance and innovation. If they come up and the problem is unimportant, there is no impact. There is the commercial case is not that convincing. That's a very difficult thing to fix. Okay. The team, I have already talked about it. The not referring to published papers, we have already talked about it. The approach, I have talked about the approach. But what you need to make sure about the approach is that you define what you are testing. You should have a strong rationale of why you are testing it. And you should have enough Goldilocks. You should have enough details so that they said that this is not superficial, not diffuse, but you don't need too much details of that, because then you're going to bore the reviewers with too much details. Okay. Of course, you should have potential, pitfalls, alternatives, and things like that. And it cannot be a huge you should not be proposing a lot of things which is unrealistic with respect to timeline and budget and all. So these are some common problems. So the take-home message is basically the summary of what I've talked about. First impression matters. Put your best foot forward. This is the very important thing. Okay. The most important thing of the grant is your pitch, your significance. Okay. Rationalize why you're doing it. What is the problem you're trying to find? Make sure you have graphs, figures, and everything. Make the reviewer's life easy. Preliminary data is always very important, and it's very good to have. Now, you need to understand what is the difference between preliminary data and prior studies. If the data is generated by you, your team, or someone, an academic partner you're doing, and they have published it, that is preliminary data. But if you are basing your rationale of your product based on something published, but that is not done by you, that is prior study. It is perfectly fine to do that, but that is prior study. That is not preliminary data. Again, approach, I have talked about it in length. Balance is the key. Remember that. And finally, remember this is a product development thing. So keep that in mind. Okay. And I've also mentioned that address any gap burning questions upfront. In the specific games, also when you're writing the research strategy, address it upfront. And finally, when you get the summary statement, develop a thick skin. It's not personal, but it hurts. Okay, it hurts. Don't take it personally. Regroup, reanalyze, resubmit. It's a game. Think of this as that when you're submitting, when you're pitching it to ventures, you pitch it to 10, 20, 30 different ventures. Some says this is not a fit. Some says I don't believe it. There are 4 or 5 where you pitch it and then you get the money, right? This is exactly that, but you're getting undiluted funding. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Arbitro. I know we've been getting a lot of questions. We've answered a lot through the chat, but there are a few that we haven't done so far. We'll just maybe ask one question, and then I think there's a few left that we can respond to after the session is over. Arbitro, how can we address the concern that many reviewers comments on regarding continued aims? The critique has been that aim depends on the success of the previous aim.
Yeah. This is very common in academic grants like R01s and all. For SBI and all, it depends. Like if everything is dependent, right? Like if your efficacy doesn't, they can go after that if your efficacy, you don't show efficacy, then no use of doing safety and all. So, but that is unrealistic. But what dependent aim means is that, and it's again the way you write it, it should not be that if you're doing efficacy, it should not be your aim 1 is something, and then based on that, you're doing efficacy again on the second aim. So that is what it means. Like now, it is very, very specific for a problem or specific for a grant or aim. So it's very difficult to address that until I see it, but it is addressable. That is what that is a short answer I can say about it. But it is a valid thing, but I've seen this more on academic grants than SBIR grants, to be honest.
All right, Caroline, I think we're at time, so we'll pass it back to you, and then we can respond to any questions after this that we received and send that to you, Caroline.
Great. Thank you both so much for putting this webinar together. Thank you everybody for attending. I will follow up probably tomorrow with a recording. And I will send the questions over to Fedsprout to see how many they can get answered. With that, I will see you all next time.
Thanks.
Bye all.